Good afternoon. Welcome to the News Roundup for Monday, September 8, 2025. I'm your host, Bill Thomas. We have some compelling stories to share with you today, and here's what's happening right now on the Big Roundup. We begin with this, the Kremlin taking a very hard line to President Trump's threat to impose steep new sanctions on Russia. The Israeli military pressing further into Gaza City as the U.S. gives Hamas one final ultimatum, and lawmakers in Congress now in full support of the Trump administration's efforts, all to deploy the U.S. military on American soil. Also, a prominent cabinet member threatening to punch another federal official in the face, and a popular 70s TV sitcom replaces one of their leading characters without letting the audience in on their secret. All this and much more coming up right now on the Big Roundup. We have a great deal to get to today, and we begin with Russia's rapidly hardening response to President Trump's recent threat to impose an entirely new round of crippling financial sanctions against Moscow. In case you're not aware, this weekend saw Russia launching their largest air attack against Ukraine since the war began in 2022. That aerial assault involving more than 800 drones, over a dozen missiles as well, and leaving 4 people dead with more than 40 others injured. Those strikes also targeting the headquarters of the Ukrainian government in Kyiv, as well as a number of residential buildings. And for that reason, U.S. Special Envoy for Ukraine Keith Kellogg, he now admits that Russia's escalating attacks are a clear sign that Moscow is not interested in reaching any kind of diplomatic solution to that war. As a result, President Trump now weighing whether or not to level a series of additional financial sanctions against Moscow, as well as impose a number of substantial tariffs on countries who buy Russian oil. Meanwhile, the Kremlin now says that so far, the sanctions, which have already been imposed upon them by the West, have had absolutely no effect on Russia at all. They claim that both Ukraine and their European allies are simply doing everything in their power to lure the U.S. into their web and use these sanctions to advance their agenda. They also say that while they prefer to achieve their goals and guarantee their nation's security through political and diplomatic means, right now that's simply not possible because Ukraine and its allies simply don't want to make a deal. I think they got that kind of backwards. As a result, Russia says they're planning to continue their brutal special military operation in Ukraine until further notice. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says the real diplomacy to end the devastating war could have begun long ago. That Russia's latest rounds of killings, deliberate crime, which is designed to prolong the fighting, and that the U.S. has repeatedly promised to impose sweeping sanctions against Moscow if they refuse to return to the negotiating table. Now, Zelensky recently met with officials from more than 30 countries to discuss security guarantees for Ukraine at what's called a Coalition of the Willing, a big meeting in Paris, with President Trump calling into the summit and urging both Europe to both stop buying oil from Russia and to begin applying economic pressure on China for funding Moscow's war effort. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, sanctions, tariffs, penalties, and all the rest. It's kind of like telling a 5-year-old child no 10, 11, 12 times in a row and with no follow-up. You know how it pans out. The child will rapidly learn that no means nothing, and they'll continue misbehaving because they understand full well that, in the end, no has no legitimate meaning or consequence. Same exact deal here. Russia knows precisely how to live with, survive, and even thrive with sanctions and tariffs. Collectively, they mean very little, if anything. And to date, no penalties, severe or otherwise, have been levied against Russia, which could hamper their agenda, which is, as we all know, destroy Ukraine. The brutal attacks against Russia's victim over the weekend, a clear example of Vladimir Putin's bloodthirsty agenda. Each bomb, every drone attack, every act of violence against Ukraine, that brings him one step closer to victory in his mind. And for a murderous dictator, no cost is too large in his endeavor to take Ukraine, to win, in other words. And so you know, Putin cares nothing about Russian or Ukrainian military and civilian casualties. North Korea's Kim Jong-un, he's farming out fighters from his country to Russia who are also dying. But it's perfectly acceptable to Vladimir Putin, a global leader, a real stand-up guy. With that, producer Davey joining us now from the home office on the East Coast. And this is our top story, Davey. As you know, good afternoon. Welcome to the program. You're in charge of the email bag. And I can't imagine what folks are saying about this one. That was a brutal weekend. So who's up first?
Okay, Bill, good to see you again. Let's head straight to the mailbag. And we begin today with Adam, who's writing to us from Auburn, Alabama.
And Adam already had the email address. I failed to mention it. I think people have kind of memorized it by now. But it is newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Adam, what's on your mind, sir?
Okay, Adam says the president gave Russia a 50-day deadline for sanctions, then a 12-day deadline, then no deadline at all. He's doing nothing but look weak while Putin is smiling all the way to the bank.
Yeah, I kind of agree. These threats of sanctions and threats of these terribly consequential sanctions, we keep doing that more and more and more, but nothing seems to work. And Russia even acknowledges it. They're very candid about it. Do all the sanctions you want, all the tariffs you want, all the penalties you want. It's not going to harm their economy. So far, it isn't. They've got plenty of resources, and that war rages on. Adam, appreciate you checking in. And Davey, who's up next?
Okay, Bill, here's a different view from Vic in San Luis Obispo, California.
What you got for us, Vic? In SLO, they call that slow country. It's beautiful. About the halfway point between Los Angeles and San Francisco. That is some good living.
Okay, well, Vic says clearly Russia doesn't want peace and sanctions aren't working. It's time to stand with our European brothers no matter what it takes.
Yeah, we are standing with our European brethren. Russia, you're right, absolutely no desire to diplomatically end this war. Ukraine, the Trump administration, all of our global allies doing everything possible to achieve peace, but Putin simply will not cooperate. Hey, by the way, so you know, this is not a war, according to Russia. Russia does not call this a war. They call it the SVO, Special Military Operation. And perhaps that helps them sleep better at night. Makes no sense, but that's what they're calling it. All right, change things up now just a bit. Turn our attention to the raging war in the Middle East and a desperate last-ditch effort by the Trump administration to bring an immediate end to the ongoing death and destruction in the Gaza Strip. Israel now ramping up their large-scale military offensive to take over the entirety of Gaza City, warning nearly 1 million people who currently live in the area to leave right away, while targeting and demolishing a number of high-rise office buildings, which they claim are currently being used as outposts by the terrorist group Hamas. In the meantime, President Trump now says he's giving away his last warning. It's to Hamas regarding the possibility of a temporary ceasefire deal, which would bring an immediate halt to the fighting. According to Arab officials, the new U.S. proposal, which is on the table, would result in the release of all of the remaining hostages, which are currently being held by Hamas, and all in exchange, 3,000 Palestinian prisoners, including many who are serving life sentences, would be set free by Israel. So, you know, the deal also calls for Israeli troops to withdraw from Gaza once the trade has completed and a ceasefire has been established, and while negotiations for a long-term peace agreement continue to move forward. Well, right now, Israeli officials say they're ready to sign off on the deal. However, many other people who are in favor of the proposal remain highly skeptical that it will ever see the light of day, with one Hamas official saying that accepting the offer would amount to a humiliating surrender for his terror group. For now, the tragic body count from the devastating war continues to grow, with a pair of Palestinian gunmen opening fire at a bus stop in Jerusalem. That was earlier today, killing 6 people, wounding a dozen others, while in Gaza City, 4 Israeli soldiers are dead following an attack by a militant hurling a makeshift bomb into their tank. Additionally, health officials in Gaza now reporting that 65 Palestinians have been killed and more than 300 others injured by Israeli fire over the past 24 hours alone. Now, despite the death and destruction, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he's sticking to his guns. He says the war will definitely not end until all of the remaining hostages are returned and Hamas is, in fact, permanently disarmed. Final thoughts, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. You know, sometimes it sort of feels like the world is on fire. And with regard to the war between Israel and Hamas, things seem to just get worse each and every day, sometimes hour by hour. Both Israel and the Trump administration are on the same page with regard to bringing this entirely unnecessary war to a close. And right now it's all contingent upon Hamas by simply returning all Israeli hostages, which for now they're refusing to do. But that would bring an end to the war just like that. To further complicate the potential peace process, today's murderous shooting in Jerusalem should be condemned by all of Israel's allies worldwide. Now, regarding what sounds like the Trump administration's last and final offer, hostages released, Palestinian prisoners exchanged, a ceasefire, and Israel leaving Gaza sounds nearly impossible. And Hamas, while brutally diminished, they will never agree. Your thoughts, your comments, questions, or concerns, anything you got, always welcome. And we're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. And with that, Davey, let's go to the email bag. Who we turn to off the top?
Okay, Bill, here's one from Dan in New York City.
Hello, Dan.
And Dan says there's a ceasefire deal on the table while Gaza City is being destroyed and millions of people are starving. If Hamas doesn't take advantage of this last chance, whatever happens is on them.
Well, everything that's happened is on them. This war is on them. They initiated this war out of thin air. You'll recall what happened. And in case you forgot, it was Hamas, the Hamas-led militants. They abducted 251 people, and that was in the attack nearly 2 years ago. 7 October 2023. We all remember it well. A massive attack. They killed 1,200 people, and mostly civilians, innocent civilians. 48 hostages still being held by Hamas. However, about 20 of them are only believed to be alive. The rest of them are gone now. But Israel's sticking to their guns as well as they should. They want those hostages back, and rapidly. And that's the beginning of the end of this terrible conflict. We're going to switch things up just a bit now, shift our focus to Capitol Hill, where a large number of lawmakers in Congress are now rallying behind President Trump's ambitious plan, all to use the U.S. military to regain control over our nation's lawless and violent crime-plagued cities. Right now, a number of prominent Republicans are throwing their supports behind the president's unprecedented use of the National Guard to restore order in many of our out-of-control American cities, including both Los Angeles and Washington, D.C. And they're doubling down by backing up his goal to add Chicago, Baltimore, and even New Orleans to that exclusive list. Lawmakers from Louisiana say they think it's a tremendous idea to deploy the National Guard to the Big Easy simply because they need all the help they can get when it comes to fighting the rampant crime in New Orleans. Meanwhile, a number of other lawmakers questioning why several Democratic mayors are turning their noses at the Trump administration's offer to help combat crime in their blue state cities. They argue that these big city Democrats, they're making an enormous mistake, and they're being completely tone deaf when it comes to confronting the issue. Help is being offered. It's on the table. How can you turn that away? It makes no sense. And many experts argue that by using the National Guard to support his domestic agenda, the president is actually involving the U.S. military in civilian law enforcement in a way that's never been done before in American history. Hey, man, desperate times, desperate measures. You do what you got to do. According to the U.S. Constitution, our nation's Congress is normally in charge of establishing any laws which determine how the National Guard can or cannot be used on U.S. soil. However, recently, it's been the U.S. court system which is attempting to keep the president's use of the National Guard in check, with one federal judge claiming that right now, the administration is trying to create a national police force with the president as its chief of police. Yeah, it does kind of sound like that. Kind of feels like that. And I haven't got a problem with it. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, look, if the U.S. military can be deployed to every corner of the earth at any time and for any number of operations, and all in defense of whomever needs protection, well, then we can certainly provide those same protections to our own U.S. citizens. Yeah, right here at home. I could be wrong, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, but as you know, I've never once been wrong about anything, right?
Never been wrong, Bill. Not once.
This one time, it's possible that I'm wrong, and I doubt it, but I think this is what they call America First. Is that what they call that, Davey? America First?
I think that's part of the definition. Yes, sir.
Take back the streets, man. The National Guard has already been deployed to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital, to secure, clean up, and safeguard the city, and the results have been remarkable. Even the mayor, Ms. Bowser, even she kind of agrees with what the Trump administration is doing. She sees the benefits. You know, just a few months ago in L.A., crime, looting, out-of-control protesters, and violence against law enforcement, that led the Trump administration to deploy Guard troops to that area. Things quieted down very rapidly, and in time, those troops, they were sent home. Hey, look, this works, and this should not be a partisan issue. Hey, Chicago and Baltimore, New Orleans, Oakland, San Bernardino, Detroit, and all the rest. Look, don't wait for the Trump administration to knock on the door and send troops in to make your city safe. Call them first and simply say, hey, we've fallen and we can't get up. Far too many big cities. Yeah, they're in a state of disrepair. Crime is big business. People are scared. They're getting hurt. Yeah, they need help, man. Hey, fortunately, it's a free country, and if you have a choice, you do have a choice. You can struggle through crime and gangs, homicides. Hello, Chicago. Also drugs and living in perpetual danger. or simply support the Trump administration's efforts to take the streets back and make America safe again? Your comments and questions, absolutely always encouraged, and reach out to us via email. We're at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, who do we go to? No one better disagree with this one. It's just common sense. It's black and white, man.
Well, there is somebody who disagrees, Bill. It's Biff in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Biff, bring it on.
And Biff says, your story is a bit misleading. The House Republicans back Trump no matter what he says, and yeah, they're a majority by one vote, but that means the other half totally disagree, and in no way is this overwhelming support.
Well, maybe it is overwhelming. Maybe it's not. Either way, Republicans are on board with the president. If Democrats want to go against the president, they're going against you and I, the citizens of the country. All of us who live in these big cities. I'm here in L.A. I've got friends in San Bernardino, maybe an hour and a half east of L.A., not the whole town, but the city has a lot of crime. It has a lot of issues. Detroit is not safe. A lot of our big cities in red and blue states are out of control. They need help. The Trump administration is here to the rescue. They're willing to jump in and provide that help. To turn it away makes absolutely no sense. I do appreciate checking in, Biff. Davey, one more, and then we'll press ahead.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Lem in Houston, Texas.
Hiya, Lem.
Lem says, everyone who lives in or near a big city knows that they've become dangerous pits of filth, violence, and drugs, where innocent people are victims and criminals run free. God bless President Trump, the great savior of our nation.
Absolutely, and I'll reiterate what I said just a few moments ago. If we can send our military all across the planet on a number of missions at any time, 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, we can certainly deploy those same troops to our big cities, take our cities back, take our states back, take the country back, one big city at a time. All right, now some additional headlines we are keeping a close watch on in the News Roundup newsroom. First off, President Trump now urging foreign companies who are operating here in the U.S. to hire American workers. This after last week's massive immigration bust targeting hundreds of illegal South Korean workers, and that was at a Hyundai factory in Georgia. A high-profile social gathering of top cabinet members nearly comes to blows when Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, he threatens to punch a federal housing official right in the kisser. Now the dispute allegedly erupting over a personal issue concerning both the president and government finance programs related to housing. And they call that Davey conduct on becoming a cabinet member. Get it together, Bessent. Be a grown-up. Also, new details emerging regarding Florida's plan to eliminate vaccine mandates for school children. The state's health department now saying that their new policies, they likely won't go into effect until 90 days from right now, another few more months. That they'll only include certain vaccines, including those for chickenpox, meningitis, and hepatitis B, and that other vaccination requirements for diseases, things like measles, polio, and the mumps, will remain firmly in place. All right, switch things up now just a bit and take a quick glance, just a quick one, at some pressing topics which are making headlines today in the world of business, and this impacts you and me. Shares of stock in the parent company of Tylenol, a company called Kenvue, taking a significant hit following a report that Health and Human Services Secretary RFK Jr. now planning to release a paper showing a potential link between the popular drug, or what they call an analgesic, and autism. American automakers General Motors and Ford shifting gears and priorities as they redirect their investments from electric vehicles to gas-powered cars and trucks following the Trump administration's successful efforts to roll back a bunch of previously mandated federal emission standards and incentive programs. I've got a gas engine car. Davey, I imagine you do as well. I love my gasoline engine. And in California, tech giant Apple, I've heard of them, preparing to unveil their newest product line, including their highly anticipated iPhone 17 and the new version of the Apple Watch. It's all happening at their annual fall event, and that gathering scheduled to take place just hours from right now, in case you love that high-tech toy stuff. And now it is time for the lighter side of news, where we take an engaging look at a few fascinating stories guaranteed to keep you coming back for more. This is Juicy. Kick things off today with a story you can probably relate to, especially if you've ever taken a vacation, only to have something go terribly wrong. Yeah, it happens from time to time. An unidentified traveler says he recently got stuck with an enormous medical bill simply for contracting a minor illness while he was stuck on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean. The annoyed passenger says he fell ill with an undisclosed condition while he was taking a trip on the Norwegian cruise line Escape, and that he became even more nauseous when he got a glimpse of the staggering bill, which added up to 10 grand. According to the passenger's receipts, they were charged more than $8,700 for 21 routine medical tests related to whatever the illness was, $100 for a simple fingertip pulse reading. I can do that for $5, and $1,000 more for medicine and supplies. Band-Aids apparently aren't too cheap anymore. In the meantime, a number of similarly frustrated people now sharing their experiences on social media, with one mortified individual pointing out that this is why you never, ever travel outside the country without insurance. Well, Davey, there you go again. Dreadful Davey finding the worst in a story. Yeah, the guy got mildly ill and ended up with a little medical bill. What was it, $10 or $110 or something, Davey?
Bill, $10,000, Bill.
Look, the doc took care. It's just money. He's off on holiday. A $10,000 medical bill. But you left out the rest of the story. How about the rest of the cruise, Davey? You didn't mention the fact that had he not taken ill, he might have had fun playing bingo or chowing down on the all-you-can-eat soft-serve ice cream, or maybe going to one of those cheesy, low-budget, generic entertainment-type shows, the karaoke nights and the silent disco. Now, all those things, that's worth a good, what, 15, 18, maybe $20?
You can't put a price on fun, Bill.
You can't put a price on bingo or disco nights or karaoke. Yeah, bottom line, this guy apparently had no sea legs. He belongs in a dry dock, and we're glad he's feeling better, although a $10,000 medical bill. All right, Producer Davey, you are officially in the doghouse now for hiding this next story from the American public, literally for decades and decades. You apparently have some big breaking Brady Bunch news to share with us, yes?
Absolutely, Bill. We're sharing it now, and it's going to make all Brady Bunch fans even happier to know it.
We'll turn now to a surprising revelation which concerns a beloved character from a popular TV sitcom who apparently left the show. And if you're a fan of the Brady Bunch, like I am, I'm obsessed. You may have never even noticed. I didn't. You may recall that the Brady family had a pet dog named Tiger who can be seen wagging his tail through a whole bunch of Brady episodes during the first couple of seasons of the show. However, at one point near the end of the second season, Tiger completely disappears, and we just found out why, and it ain't pretty. According to the show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz, the original dog who played Tiger accidentally killed when he was hit by a car, and instead of telling the show's producers, the dog's trainer simply replaced the original Tiger with another dog that looked exactly like the first one. However, the ruse quickly became apparent when the imposter Mutt refused to take orders from his owner and wouldn't sit still during filming. And ultimately, the trainer fessed up. Both he and his new best friend got the boot. And according to the show's creator, Sherwood Schwartz, that was the end of Tiger, who was never seen on the show again. You know, another amazing story, my favorite Brady from the original TV series, hit by a car and killed, and nobody ever told me. I guess folks would have known, Davey, I would have broke down in tears had I found this out much earlier. I consider myself a Brady Bunch aficionado, always suspected there was something a little odd about that second Tiger, and they misled the American public for all those years. Just tragic. Now then, Davey, I'm demanding a full-scale investigation, and I want to know if Mike, Carol, any of the kids, or Big Al, Alice, the housekeeper, was similarly replaced without our knowledge. Producers of that show, Davey, they owe us an explanation. And by the way, the show jumped the shark. Do you know when the show jumped the shark, Davey?
When did the show jump the shark, Bill?
It jumped the shark when they brought in Cousin Oliver, who really didn't add a whole heck of a lot to the program. Cute kid, but added nothing. And good to know that all 6 Brady kids, 7 if you count little baby Cousin Ollie, are all alive and well and thriving. Last I heard, anyway. All right, one more for the road, Davey, and you have some earth-shattering medical news today, yes?
Bill, this is big news for a lot of people, and it's based on a groundbreaking scientific experiment.
I'll drink to that. Finally today in American medicine, it's taking another gigantic step forward as yet another patient receives an experimental kidney transplant. Did I read this right? From a pig? Is that right?
That's correct, Bill.
A kidney transplant from a piggy. No kidding. Doctors in Massachusetts say that a 54-year-old self-described science nerd doing very well nearly 3 months after receiving the pig organ. They also report that another individual who received a pig kidney transplant earlier this year also doing remarkably well and has now gone more than 7 months without receiving dialysis. Now, in case you're not aware, more than 100,000 people are currently waiting for organ transplants in the U.S., with many of them needing a kidney. However, so you know, there is a significant shortage, and many people wind up dying while they're still on that waiting list. This sounds like a big deal. As a result, researchers are now genetically altering pigs so that their organs become more human-like, and their experiments to provide gene-edited pig kidney transplants to a whole bunch of people. They've just been approved by the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. We call them the FDA. Now, this really is an amazing story, and perhaps all of us should stop eating bacon, pork chops, ham, sausage, all the rest, as these cute little critters, they just might be in a position to keep us alive. We got to show them some respect. And if you don't know a lot about pigs, Davey, I assume you don't, I'm going to provide you now with some background. Are you ready?
I'm ready, Bill. I'm anxious to hear what you got to say.
Do you have a notepad and a pen or a pencil?
Okay, let me grab. Yep, I've got a notepad,
All right.
a pen, and ready to go.
All right, take copious notes. There might be a test. A pig, Davy, is an animal with dirt on his face. His shoes are a terrible disgrace. He has no manners when he eats his food. He's fat and lazy and extremely rude. But, Davy, if you don't care a feather or a fig, you may grow up to be a pig, particularly if you get a kidney transplant from that gorgeous little creature. I like this one. I also like Arnold Ziffel. I miss Arnold Ziffel. He was the pig on that TV show, Davy, Green Acres. And that is a quick look at the latter side of news. Any of those three stories tickle your fancy, then the first thing you got to do is scratch your fancy. You don't want to be itching during this program. And then drop us an email, and you'll find us at newsroundupwithbill@gmail.com. Davey, to that big, bustling email bag we go, and who do we go to first?
Okay, Bill, the first one we go to is Barney in Nags Head, North Carolina.
Hello, Barney. I know Nags Head. That's going to be North Carolina on the, there's a name for that part of town. What is it called, David? Do you know?
The Outer Banks.
The Outer Banks. I have friends on the Outer Banks. Absolutely.
Yeah, and Barney says that cruise ship person should sue the cruise line for giving them the illness in the first place. Didn't say what it was, but I'll bet they got it at the buffet.
Yeah, well, entirely possible. Although, by and large, they have good grub on those cruise ships. Another thing is, if this was a Love Boat, what was the doc on that show? What was his name? Do you recall? It was Bernie Coppell, but what was his doctor's name?
Yeah, I don't remember the guys. It was Bernie Coppell, who was, wonderful in Get Smart, of course.
Siegfried, if I remember correctly. But look,
Yes.
If he was on the Love Boat, Doc would have done anything he could to make him happy and healthy, and he wouldn't have given him a $10,000 bill. I got a problem with that.
Yeah,
All
you're
right.
right. You're right, Bill.
Now, who's up next?
Okay, here's one from Scott in Aberdeen, Maryland.
What's on your mind, Scott?
Scott says, so sad to hear about the Brady Bunch's dog. He was my all-time favorite. I always wondered what happened to him, and now the mystery has been solved.
Yeah, but at least we know the Brady kids are alive and well, healthy and thriving. I've been to the Brady house, by the way, Davey, which is near Studio City, not far from Universal Studios in Hollywood, California. I've driven by there a couple of times. I have some friends in that neighborhood, and you can still see the Brady house as gorgeous as it ever was. And one more, and then we're going to wrap it up.
Okay, Bill, here's one from Rachel in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hiya, Rachel. What are you thinking?
And Rachel says, quote, great news about those marvelous pig kidney transplants.
Yeah.
It also confirms what I've been saying about men my entire life.
Now, Rachel, that wasn't necessary. I get what she's saying. All men are pigs. Is that right, Davey?
Maybe she's alluding to that, Bill. Let her have it.
Come on, Rachel. What are you doing? All right, time now for us to call it a wrap on the Don't Strain Your Brain Monday edition of the Big News Roundup. And before we go, as we do each and every day right here on the big program, we share with you a very notable quote. And these thought-provoking words come to us today from Albert Einstein, who said all those years ago, peace cannot be kept by force. It can only be achieved by understanding. Einstein was a German-born American physicist, best known for his coming up with the world-famous theory of relativity. And by the way, he also won the Nobel Prize for Physics in 1921. Overall, a pretty bright guy. And now time for us to bust on out of here. But before we call it a day, don't forget the News Roundup motto. Never forget that. Ask not what your podcast can do for you. Ask what you can do for your podcast. And it's pretty basic. You can simply subscribe to this program so you never miss even a single episode. For now, it looks like our time, it's officially up. So have an awesome day today. Please stay safe. Let's all continue to watch out for one another as well. With that, Engineer Henry, I beg of you to dim these lights. Let's gently fade to black. Let's wrap it up, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow afternoon.